Okay, this question says, if actual inflation exceeds anticipated inflation, who will lose purchasing power and who will gain? How does unanticipated inflation harm the employer harm the country? As part of your answer, include how you and your employer would be, would both be affected. So we know that inflation is when the prices go up so that the purchasing power of the dollar goes down, right? And so we're asked to distinguish between actual and anticipated inflation, which is saying that when people don't have the ability to prepare for inflation, that's when we'll talk about when actual inflation exceeds anticipated inflation. So in that sense, who's losing purchasing power when this happens and who gains? So the people who are losing purchasing power, well, technically, everybody's losing purchasing power, but the people who are, everybody in the economy, money is worth less. So the people who are benefiting from this loss of purchasing power are people who hold a lot of debt, right? Because all of a sudden with inflation, the nominal amount of debt has not changed, but the amount of purchasing power that debt buys has gone down. And so if you owe money and there's high inflation, more than anticipated inflation, then you benefit because you have less value to pay back on your debt. Those are the people who benefit. The people who are hurt are the people who lent out money, right? Who let other people use their money, because now the money that they're getting back, even though it's nominally what their principal was plus interest, the actual purchasing power of the money that they got back is actually lower. And so that's one of the big distinctions between who's benefiting and who's not. How does unanticipated inflation harm the country? And so most of the time when you have unanticipated inflation, the people are going to spend less time on productive activities and more time trying to work on activities that would isolate you from the effects of inflation. And one thing that could happen is for people who are lending out money, there's going to be less incentive for them to lend out money. That can decrease the amount of money available for loans. And also, you could also see that for people who are trying to make an investment in long-term projects, that those investments might not pay as much dividends when the purchasing power is lower in the future. And so you might see more short-term projects instead of long-term projects. And finally, the question asks us to talk about how your employer and how employees and employers would be affected. And so if we have high inflation, that means that the wages that employees are earning have effectively gone down. The real wage rate has gone down because even though you make the same amount of money, the prices have gone up and you can purchase less stuff. And so employees are going to be hurt by this policy. Meanwhile, employers will be benefited because they only have to pay out the same nominal wages while they are able to reap in larger nominal profits due to higher prices. And so they're benefiting from this high price situation and maintaining a lower real wage rate for paying their employees. So that's how employers and employees are being affected. So let's take a look at what the previous tutor said. So the previous tutor said that unexpected inflation is considerably more problematic. When inflation is higher than expected, it tends to hurt workers, recipients of fixed incomes, and savers. In contrast, unexpected inflation often benefits companies who can raise prices quickly without needing to raise wages in tandem, and borrowers who can repay their debt with money that is now worth less than when they borrowed it. Right, so this is what we were talking about. Over the long term, unanticipated inflation can cause a number of problems for an economy. Businesses will invest less in long-term projects because of the uncertainty of returns. Price information becomes distorted, and consumers will spend more time trying to protect themselves from inflation and less time engaging in productive activities. Periods of inflation also tend to redirect investment from businesses and towards hard assets, thus depriving companies of the capital that they need to grow and expand. Higher than anticipated inflation lowers the real wage rate, and employers gain at the expense of workers. Lower than anticipated inflation raises the real wage rate, and workers gain at the expense of employers. Higher than anticipated inflation lowers the real wage rate, increases the quantity of labor demanded, makes jobs easier to find, and lowers the unemployment rate. Sure. And lower than unanticipated inflation raises the real wage rate, decreases the quantity of labor demanded, and increases the unemployment rate. Right, so I think this tutor covers all the bases very well, and so nothing else much to add here. Great answer, and we can move on to the next question.